Timothy Owens Moore.
Greetings, thank you for that warm welcome, Courtney. I bring greetings from Georgia, Atlanta, AUC, Clark Atlanta University, back down here in FAMU. I really enjoyed the opportunity to spend time with you. I've come here several times for the African Black Psychology Conference, and here we now have a theme week that you have been doing for years. So for me, it's an honor to be invited back. Sometimes the reality is that sometimes people don't get invited back because what may not have done the right thing. So evidently I've delivered what I was supposed to for you in this community, so I'm honored to be before you to speak today. My topic is supposed to be discussing the theme of the conference. I had kind of related to the health component because of my background. So health and healing for the globalized African mind. So as I traveled, I wanted to share with you some things that I've experienced and also to encourage the young people, the students, to see the world. That's why I put the globalized part there. So let me go ahead and begin. The second slide. The second slide there says, somebody's got to hold the line, and that's what you're focusing on here. What is the state of the African Black experience? And you know we're having some challenges with our HBCUs. So last week I was in Jackson, Mississippi, and interestingly, I'm staying at the Hyatt downtown. I guess you say downtown by Railroad Avenue. Nice opportunity for our schools to have facilities nearby so we can stay. Jackson State's there. I don't know if it's the basketball team or who the representative of Jackson State is here in Tallahassee. I was there, and Baton Rouge was represented in Jackson. That is from Southern. These are Southern students here. Brother Rackett brought his students from Southern. That's great. We'll hear the presentation later on today after I conclude this presentation here. We had students from Jackson, also Grambling. And so the reality is...
VCU.
Okay, so Bethune-Cookman is represented right here. Go representing later on. So FAMU right here is the Black Mecca of Black Psychology.
That's right.
So as you all are bringing us all together, I bring greetings from Atlanta, where we also had our research week. We also had the Southeastern Psychological Association meeting in Orlando that happened about 2 weeks ago. So we're involved in that also. So the reason why it's a challenging time this year for students to travel is because you got your classes, you have your research, you have a whole lot going on. So this time of the year is really challenging. So thank you for these coming on out. I heard in the news, if you did not know, about Tennessee State University.
Yep.
The legislatures,
Yep.
they removed the board of Tennessee State University, which is at HBCU. Yeah, they made some kind of political shenanigans to remove the board from this HBCU. Well, Tennessee State University, in my opinion, has already crossed over to no longer be an HBCU. It's pretty much like a white institution. Even the psychology department, actually, the chairperson is white. The tennis team primarily is all white. They won some championships in tennis, but they brought the Melin and recessive individuals in there to kind of control and run that. But Tennessee State University is crossing over. You heard what happened to Lincoln University in Missouri? About, I guess, a few months ago when the young lady administrator committed suicide. Blaming it on the hostile environment from the white person that was running the institution. Our institutions are no longer being controlled by us. That's a problem. So when we say the state of the African Black experience, when do we start putting ourselves in a position to say we need to now be in more control to dictate how education is going to be conducted? So I appreciate you at FAMU for holding the line, for being as strong as you can over the years. I have a few rattlers in my department. Few, I got 4, that's a lot, isn't it? So the rattlers are going on up to Clark Atlanta University. I got Dr. Michelle Mitchell, Dr. Denise Lovett, I Keisha Farr-Brown has been here crossing this waters, and then we have Professor Olisa Yatolo. So we got a lot of FAMU people that are at Clark, but the point is that we got to start creating an overlap. Many of the students right now, you are here with your advisors and your chairs and people that you look at now as your JEGNIs. We've got Dr. Nine Marfar here, who's been a JEGNI for many of us. So don't take it lightly with the connections that you're making right now. Second person in charge of this institution is a graduate of the same place I went to, Lincoln University, Brother Donald Palm. Dr. Palm, are you in this audience? Thank you for showing up. An administrator taking the time to see what the students are doing. Administrator taking the time to see how the academic departments are running. Do you know how many people don't get involved in the academics of an institution like this? What they just did at Tennessee State University, they want to put business people in place. They don't know academics. So if you don't put the right people in place to guide the institution, guess what? It might go adrift. So we have to be in the position to control our institutions. Next slide. And the reason why I have it there, the Melin Institute of Human Technology, because once I leave the academic world, I will start to create my own opportunities for creating a geopolitical agenda. Sometimes the academic environment becomes more constricting when you don't get a chance to do that. So I will do my best to continue on with the force by making changes in society outside of the academic world. For today, the presentation goals will be to explore the geopolitical issues impacting our group. There's a lot going on. If you're not traveling and seeing the world, you're in a little bubble, box. That's not a good place to be. So I'll share my recent travel experiences and give you a sense of how other people are really viewing us. Because when people are seeing television and that television is telling you a vision, they may see that. And if they travel, you travel, and they say, oh, is that history? Was that Beyonce? No, that's me, a student from FAMU. No, that's me from Bethune-Cookman, the future president of the university. So they don't see that. We have to carry ourselves that way so people see us that way. And then discuss our mental, physical, and spiritual health with emphasis on my work on Melin. And then emphasize what we need to do to win this war that is being waged against us. And if you don't think there's a war going on, I was in Mississippi. And if you know Nina Simone, she wrote a song called God Damn Mississippi. I don't know if you've ever been there, they got some challenges in Mississippi. So what I saw, down there in the major part of the city, still dilapidation going on. I mean, they've had water problems in the past. I don't know if you saw the news about these 6 goons. They call them the Goon Squad. These white officers that were pretty much harassing the black community for years. These 6 officers, if you check out anything on the media right now and you see what happened in Mississippi, they're now in jail for what they did to these last 2 black citizens of the United States. Horrendous, despicable crimes, but they are now in jail because of what they did. Sometimes it doesn't happen, but that happened in Mississippi, and it was happening for years. So we have to look at, again, what's really going on in the world, and it's a war against us, and if we don't have the right intellectual artillery to fight against that, we're in trouble. Next slide, please. So, the colonizer thinking. Why would the colonizer be interested in Africa? Access to resources plus depopulation equals control. So when we see what happened during the COVID crisis and all the things that happened all over the world, some people think about those things were concocted. It was created. So you depopulate a place, or you get people not interested in looking at Africa. So why are you cheating on tests that cheating on continents? We don't think about it like that. Therefore, lies need to be generated about the backwardness of Africa. Any stories you may see about Africa, you may see giraffes and elephants. Think of jungle. There's more jungle probably here in Florida or other parts of the world than it is there in Africa. But you have your mindset thinking that it's a backward place. No, it's a lot of productivity going on in Africa. So you have been told to hate yourself, because again, if I can create a situation where you don't have an interest in something that I value, I can dictate and run things. So that's how the colonizer thinks. But we need to think about us. How are we thinking? Next slide. So 70 years ago, 1954. So now we've got a 70-year time span to review something. Now we have to look at, did it really work? versus Board of Education, to dismantle segregation. When you think about it, where we are today in our black schools, I don't have a Susie and a Johnny in class, or Becky. And then how many Jamals are now going to stay at the University of Utah? You heard of having University of Utah, the women's basketball team?
Mm-hmm.
They felt threatened by what the white folks were doing to them out there in the Southwest, South Dakota, or North Dakota, somewhere out there where you don't see a lot of black people. The team was harassed and it altered their whole feelings about how they could compete in this March Madness competition. So they were in a position where, again, the system's being against them, but I thought we were supposed to be integrated. So after 7 years, we have to evaluate what's really going on with this issue of integration. We integrated, but reality is, as they moved out, as the Melin recessive people, they moved out, we didn't really integrate. We didn't assimilate, so this integration didn't really happen. Because if you look at institutions now, in the black schools that are in the inner cities, and the white people that have the white flight in charter schools, we didn't really amalgamate. So we had to question this. Thurgood Marshall right there in the middle, he's a Lincoln University grad. Must respect him for his fight to make a change. But the basis of this dealt with some psychology, if you did not know. There's some black psychologists that were involved in the decision to say, should we go ahead and make some changes in this separate but equal? Should be separate but equal. If it was separate but equal, that'd be fantastic. Tennessee State, no reason why they probably have problems. The white legislature said, oh, your malfeasance is going on and you're not operating properly. And you haven't been funding the school. Look at Lincoln University of Missouri. I'm probably sure, I don't know if it's FAMU also, but if the governmental structures give more to Florida State across the tracks versus giving it to you, you see why there's going to be some problems. That's going on at Tennessee State. Lincoln University, exact same thing. So that white person they put in place at Lincoln University of Missouri, they may not have a mission to focus on the black-oriented focus of things, but if you're not getting the money, and it's documented that the money was going to other schools, you see why the schools start to fail. So if it was separate and equal, that'd be fantastic, but it wasn't. I wasn't living during this time period when that was going on, so I can't say how hard the struggle was, but we know during that time period, black people had their own schools, had their own barbershops, had their own banks, had their own everything. As soon as the Brown versus Board of Education became an education, we started what? Disperse, and then we lost what we had as a community. Next slide, please. So, Dr. Kenneth Clark, for the psychology students, anybody tell me what they're famous for? Yes?
For the doll experiment.
Doll experiments, doll studies. So, those doll studies from back in the 50s are still being conducted today. So Dr. Clark, he actually went to Howard University. He studied under Francis Cecil Sumner. You've heard that name before. He also came from Lincoln University. So Lincoln University has some strong roots in terms of making changes in society. So Francis Cecil Sumner is the first black PhD in psychology. But he was taught he taught Kenneth Clark. But the focus was not really on black-oriented thinking. So as they're doing the doll studies, next slide please. The black children, they say, are picking the white doll versus the black doll. So the thinking then of these individuals is that, well, we have to find a way that they can have some self-esteem. I don't know what the thinking was, but let's put it with the white kids. Because they're picking the white doll, so let's put them with the white kids. Now, you all know that doesn't make sense. To have self-esteem and to understand and respect yourself, you should be having you represented in the picture. Your teacher should be looking like you. So as soon as the Brown versus Board of Education happened, you now have a dismantling of schools, teachers, principals, educators that no longer were the ones that are in the community teaching their people. That's a problem. And we fast forward today, 70 years later, you know the state of education is bad. Even after the COVID crisis, you know it's gotten bad. Why? Because of the whole technology and online education, and people have not been learning properly. So rather than now just a person from you now got a computer teaching you, that's bad. So these doll studies, which now can be used today and present the same thing, should we say put the child in a white environment to make them feel better? To me, I don't think that's the right move. And 70 years later, I think we have evidence to show that was not the right move. Next slide. So the results should be questioned. So they needed, the lawyers needed evidence to say we got dismantled education, dismantled segregation. They needed evidence, so they were using the Dow studies as evidence to say there's some changes going on with the psychology of these children and how damaging the segregation is. That's the thinking. So there were negative psychological effects of segregation on mental endowment children. So we see that with the Dow studies. They're picking the white Dow versus the black Dow. Prejudice and discrimination damage their self-esteem. So that's an interpretation. Prejudice and damage their self-esteem. So now why not focus on self-esteem? Make them stronger. Melin-dominant children developed a sense of inferiority, but they were doing fine when they were at home, fine in their communities, fine reading their own books, even though some of those books may not have been at the best in terms of the quality, but you still have the educators teaching them. And if you know today, those students who have gone on to HBCUs or have gone to HBCUs are the ones that more than likely get professional degrees, graduate degrees, and because they had a foundation at a school that focused on them, their self-esteem, and their pride, versus going to Utah or Brigham Young or anywhere else where you're not appreciated. That's why I don't have a problem with March Madness, because again, I can't see other brothers in class studying. I got brothers in my class who study. You know that they're playing in March Madness and not studying. We got some problems the way education is being constructed, and so without integration, we then lose the focus on really our self-esteem. And lastly, apparently the Dow test provided key evidence to dismantle school segregation. I don't think that if we had scholars that were thinking differently, like the next slide, I have a little collage of scholars. May his soul rest in peace, but Kobe Cambone led this department for years with a strong focus on African Black culture. Am I correct?
You're correct.
That's why we have what? The Black Psychology Theme Week, and that's why we have this as the mecca. So Kobe Cambone, in one of his books, Cultural Misorientations, he probably would have given a different direction than Dr. Clark. What do you think? Dr. Naim Akbar, on his multiple books, Know Thyself, Changing the Image of Psychological Slavery, do you think he would have given a different approach to how we would deal with segregation?
Yes.
Brother Wade Nobles, you see Wade Nobles up there with the white outfit, talking to Brother Charles Finch. Charles Finch is not a psychologist, but he also is a African-centered scholar. We had a presentation out in Seattle years ago. Do you think those scholars would say black people got a problem with self-esteem as put with white people?
Not at all.
And then on the right side there is Brother Wekesser Majumoa. He has an independent African school, which there are many, there are few in the United States. He has one that's progressive, the AI Institute in Atlanta. He's educating black kids, elementary up to high school, teaching them in an independent school setting. And those kids are sharp and go to any school in the United States. Absolutely, because he has a school that's not dealing with struggles of fighting through segregation. No, you teach your own people about their own selves, about who they are. Guess what? Your self-esteem is going to be driven. So whatever it is that went on with Dr. Kenneth Clark and his wife, maybe in the Dow study, saying black people got a problem with themselves, let's put them with white people. Bad decision. 70 years, we are seeing what problems have occurred. So Brother Noble's book, Saku, presented on his work here at the African Black Psychology Conference at FAMU years ago. That's me down the bottom there. I don't know if you see this, that scholar, that's Brother Akbar and I in Tanzania. I was sitting at the foot of the Jenga to find out how it is that I can fast forward retire like he is. He's tired, but he's put the work in. He's got a right to retire. He hasn't given up though. But he set the foundation for us to have a strong sense of self so that we can move forward. And he's still impacting people throughout his work. When I have presentations in class and I said, pick a book to do for your book report, guess what? Most of them pick Naeem's book, even though I haven't mentioned Naeem. I haven't discussed Naeem, but they go ahead and say, go to Amazon. I guess rather than going to Mind Production where you can really get his books. You gotta check that out now. Everybody's going to Amazon to get a black book. Want a black book, go to a black store to get a black book. That's why we keep it circulating in the community. not Amazon first, but think about going to the authors, the people who are producing the work. And then down there in the middle there, that's Julius Nyeri, brother Kwame Nkrumah, another university graduate. Gotta keep on saying that. That's had an impact on the world. It's like family's got people that have impact on the world. But Kwame Nkrumah, first president of Ghana, 1957, sitting here with Julius Nyeri. That brochure there is what I saw when I went there in last year, and I saw a brochure of a conference they had on Pan-Africanism. Julius Nyeri was an educator and first president of Tanzania. So as an educator, not a military man, as an educator, not a politician, as an educator, he was able to drive that country in a positive direction. Muslim, Christian, African religions, all that together, he did not ostracize. He made it an opportunity for people to grow and develop. So he also got advice from Kwame Nkrumah. So you have that Pan-African view, and I believe you had the Prince of Pan-Africanism. He was here the whole week helping you out think about Pan-African thinking. So that Pan, for those that try to, I guess, the Greek organization, there's something called Pan-Hellenic. So the Alphas and Vegas and on the side of AKA, and all y'all get together. So Pan-Hellenic or Pan-African is also very important. So those two brothers there, again, were driving forces for positive, independent thinking in Africa, on the continent. And then that's me in the middle there, at Steve Biko Institute in Brazil. A little, talk about that a little after this presentation here. Next slide, please. So, my travels, just last year, I went to Brazil, Belize, Jamaica, Mexico, Tanzania, Colombia, Bahamas, and at the end of the year, Thailand and Vietnam. So, the only way I could do that was on sabbatical. Sabbatical means you don't have to teach, not to chair. Don't have to worry about academic responsibility. So I got a chance to see the world. So as I'm sharing this with you, I'm saying that that's what you students should think about if you get an opportunity to study abroad. Study abroad, you get a chance to see the world from a different perspective. So in Brazil, I took students, 4 students in faculty to Salvador Bahia. Anybody ever heard of Salvador Bahia, students? So Salvador Bahia is where we are in the country of Brazil. So just like we got stuck here in the South after slavery or the enslavement process, how we were brought here, we stayed in the South. Well, the African people there in Salvador stayed in that part of Africa, part of Brazil up north. So I worked at the Steve Biko Institute in Brazil. Steve Biko. You ever heard of Steve Biko?
Yes, sir.
What country?
South Africa.
South Africa. So what does Steve Biko have to do with Brazil? Well, they started their independent African-centered educational system and named it after him, even though he's there in Africa. Steve Biko was a strong Pan-African leader there in South Africa. Wasn't like Nelson Mandela in the ANC, African National Congress. He was more revolutionary like the Black Panthers. One of the most powerful quotes he has is that the most powerful tool in the hands of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. That's what Steve Biko said. So they have that as their foundation for their schooling. Education is free in Brazil at the graduate, at the secondary level, because you have to be able to pass the test to get to school. A lot of Black kids may not be prepared, so they're not able to get in. So this independent institution sets that up. Well, when I was there, they had never been to South Africa, and they don't know Steve Biko. Well, prior to that, a few years earlier, I went to South Africa and I visited with a colleague, Dr. Aaron White, may her soul rest in peace. We got a chance to visit one of my students when I was there. She was in my class. I said, I'm going to South Africa in January. Oh, really? Stop by and see my family. Okay, stop by. Got there. She didn't tell me her family was a Mandela family. So I got there hanging out with Nelson, William Mandela, not Nelson, but at that point they had split up. They weren't married anymore. So I then introduced them to the Steve Biko Institute. They introduced them to Steve Biko's son. Had an anniversary. And brought Steve Biko there to South Africa, so I made that connection. Belize, beautiful Garifuna people. Us on the coast there of Belize, there in Central America. Nice to know that they got us still carrying the traditions of African culture in other parts of the world, the Garifuna people. Jamaica, I guess it's still monarchy. I don't know if they're still down with the British and the Queen and all that, but they need to have some way of focusing on their independence. Look at Montego Bay. But we heard what happened to Usain Bolt. Remember some people stole his money? His own people stole his money? Sad situation. The brother was like the superstar athlete, and his money's getting taken by his own people. But Jamaica itself is a little small country. Oh my goodness, they dominate track and field. We've already seen that. They can control the world in multiple things, but guess what? The Europeans set up so they only have one commodity, like sugar. You can't develop a whole commodity, a whole community in that context. So Jamaica, again, went there to kind of look at the internal machinations. There's another individual who I'll talk about, one in Tanzania, who was involved in the rebellions in the 1960s. Walter Rodney. Ever heard of Walter Rodney?
Yes, sir.
Wrote a book called How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. Wow. He's from Guyana. Went there to Jamaica, did some talks. Guess what? The government tried to get him out of there, and his rebellions from what he was teaching the people. So I was trying to follow the path he had gone. Mexico, went to Puerto Vallarta, but I had an opportunity there in Belize to go see some of the monuments, like Zunantinich, like gigantic monuments there in the jungle that almost like as tall as this auditorium. How did they do that out of stone? So the same things there in Mexico, the Tijuana, Chichen Itza. We've been all over the world building things. But if we hadn't traveled the world to see that, you wouldn't believe it. Tanzania. So Walter Rodney also taught at the University of Dar es Salaam. So I went there to kind of see if I could find the people who were studying under him or were taught by him. What kind of influence today does he have on how they're thinking? So that connection of looking at where we've been, you can't stay at FAMU in Tallahassee. You got to go out there and see the world. You can't stay there doing Brooklyn and Daytona. So you got to see the world. And even with Southern Baton Rouge, you got to see the world. And as you see the world, you can change the world. Colombia, I went to Cali, Colombia. Actually been to Cartagena also, but in Colombia, you got a whole black presence of us there. Check the internet. Buenaventura, black people shut down the government. Tired of being exploited. It's by the seaports. Black people shut down the government, just like you see what's going on in Baltimore now with that bridge that collapsed. Because that freight liner hit the bridge and collapsed. Guess what? The whole supply chain is now messed up. Because on that freight liner were multiple products that needed to go throughout the world. Well, just in terms of Colombia, in Buenaventura, the black people shut down the government, saying we're not going to allow you to continue to exploit us like this. And so I got mass respect for people that collectively got together to make a change. Bahamas, went to Nassau just to see again black people living there in Nassau, and Thailand and Vietnam. And I guess you don't think about black people in Thailand and Vietnam. But if you've ever heard of Runoko Rashidi, Runoko Rashidi wrote a book called My Global Presence in the World. Runoko Rashidi was involved with Ivan Van Server, writing the Journals of African Civilization, talking about the African presence in early Europe, African presence in Asia, African presence all over the world. If it wasn't for someone like Runoko Rashidi, I may not have thought about, wow, in Thailand, they have images that look like us. Buddhism, Buddha, black, what? Seeing the images of the big black noses, and now you see all the images of the heads cut off. Taking what to Europe, taken somewhere else, put on display. You never know if those were black people there. The peppercorn hair, you know it's not white people, come on. Big nose, come on, that's not white people. We were there doing that. And in Vietnam, I have a friend that lives there, so I went to go visit. And then just being there, seeing how beautiful the people are. And what we did to destroy them in the Vietnam War. What, I said we, this United States government did. One of the worst wars in history. Over what? Because they like communism? Because they like socialism? I saw when I was there, no homeless, nobody begging for money. I saw no poverty. I saw none of that. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist. What I'm saying is coming here, United States, murder, violence. I had an interesting view from my window today. I saw a white man running in Tallahassee with no shirt on, jogging. And I saw another black man with clothes on walking briskly and fast. If I was a white woman, she might call the police. Oh, the white man walking, the black man walking through the neighborhood quick and fast, please check him out. I'm looking at the white man, he got no clothes on right now. Like, that's a different perspective. In Vietnam, saw none of those kind of disparities. I mean, I was really like a pink unicorn there. They haven't seen black people. Look at me, it's like, is that Obama? And you know I'm not tall. My goodness, I was the tallest person there. Felt like out of place. But there in Vietnam, I'm saying the beauty of the people, and you see what we did to destroy how they socially work together. That's how we work together. Ho Chi Minh carried a garbage cart. Meaning that what we did, what Garvey did in the past, people respect us when they read about us, but sometimes we don't carry ourselves properly because self-esteem problems we talked about earlier. What's making you have bad self-esteem? The way the system's teaching you. Not at FAMU, they're teaching you to have strong self-esteem. That's why at FAMU people go on and produce. So we got 4 of my departments. Can't get them ready. They just keep going on. Next slide, please. So, land is the basis of all revolution. Malcolm told us that. So that's why they had not looking at Africa. So they can steal the resources. Again, you cheating on tests. They cheating on continents. So if you ever got a chance to watch that Diamond Empire documentary, it talks about what's going on with the diamonds and resources that are being stolen from Africa. It happened for years. Cecil Rhodes, King Leopold, all those people going into Africa stealing the resources. Taking them from Africa, taking them to Europe, now you see why then Africa becomes underdeveloped. That's what Walter Rodney was writing about. That's what I was seeking to see the path that he had gone to kind of get that thinking. He was assassinated in 1980 by his own government in Guyana, sadly speaking. But he is a force to really represent what's going on today, how Europe is being undeveloped in Africa, and you see what's going on with the Francophone countries. The Francophone countries there in Africa, telling the French to get out. Brothers having coups against the titular heads as the people who have been in place carrying on the European focus. So you got countries saying, look, we're tired of this. Students got to now have that same focus, and we're tired of this, we're going to make a change. Next slide, please. So Africa is a large landmass with resources. So if I was close by there and I was trying to explain to you, on the bottom there, I've been to South Africa, been to Nigeria, Ghana, with Morocco, with Egypt, so been to Tanzania. I've never been to the middle of Africa, but that's the Congo. On the right side there, that's the Congo. The Belgian Congo. Anybody know a famous leader from the Belgian Congo?
Infamous?
Who's that?
I said infamous, Leopold.
Ain't for us.
No, I thought you meant Congo.
African leader. Patrice Lumumba. Patrice Lumumba was the people's elected leader in the Congo during the 60s. The CIA, this government, that same CIA man is Wakanda. That's why I'm like, how did I put white people in the movies? Remember Wakanda, the colonizer? Why haven't they even in there? But the CIA, in cahoots with the government, had Patrice Lumumba killed. You can watch a movie, a documentary called Lumumba by Raoul Peck. Raoul Peck did a documentary on James Baldwin, I'm Not Your Negro. Check that out also. But it's describing how, again, they cut his body up. They dismantled him, they got rid of him so that you would never know that he ever existed. Because they knew that somebody like that is going to help you with your self-esteem. They're going to attack your leaders that are talking about how we can create an environment having social order and the resources for the people. And that's why that place I told you about in South America, Buenaventura, is privatized. So the people who privatize and have that area, they don't have to give any money to the people in the area. So that's why it's so dilapidated, and that's why the people are so poor. When you go look at the internet and look at Buenaventura, it looks worse than Mississippi. Places in Mississippi, that is. So the Congo becomes very important. Next slide, please. So, Ukraine. Anybody have any Ukrainian friends? Any ever been to Ukraine? Anybody know anything about Ukraine? It's not our cultural experience, huh? True that. But on the bottom there, which you can't see, it says the Black Russia. Written by this author named Vladimir Alexandrov. The Black Russia. Are there black people in Russia?
Yes.
Are there black people in Ukraine?
Yes.
Yes. And you saw what happened when this Russian invasion happened, and Ukraine was asking for money from the United States, and the black people were trying to get out. And the government was like, look, y'all stay here and fight, or get in the back of the train. They weren't treated properly coming from Ukraine. So current day Ukraine, at the very bottom there's a place called Crimea. Crimea is where they say the Russians had invaded before, but all that area they said was theirs in the first place. So Crimea on the very bottom, and then you now got the Russians taking care of this, and now you got this whole drama going on there in Europe. So what does it have to do with you? Next slide, please. So the Black Russian was written by this white guy named Vladimir Alexandrov, but there was a brother back in the 1800s and from Mississippi that was like a millionaire in Russia. Fascinating book. Here is a picture of in the middle, of the place that he was in the United States. So, born in Mississippi, dad died violently, just like Malcolm X's dad did. Malcolm X's dad was murdered by the KKK, violently. His dad was murdered by some white people in Mississippi, violently. So I'm saying, how does someone come from that experience rise to be as great as they are? So Mississippi, Tennessee, Arkansas, Chicago, and then New York. This is all his early life as he's now traveling versus you staying in Baton Rouge, or staying in Tallahassee, or staying wherever you may from. This is back in the 1800s, traveling the world. And then when he goes to Europe, oh my goodness, how the heck does he get to France, England, Italy? Because he was like serving as a porter, got some skills and served as a maitre d', got some skills and started their own restaurant, got some skills, owned clubs, got some skills. Didn't have to worry about education at the point. He was an entrepreneur, learning from others. The point I'm making is, he was all up in those places where Ukraine is. So we look at Ukraine today and places like that, like we don't have any impact. No, this brother back in the day was making an impact, which means you can make an impact too. You don't know the stories, then you're not going to be able to represent that. But he was in Mississippi, the same place I said I was last week. I was the past president for the Association of Social Behavioral Scientists. So that's what we had in Jackson. I just told you about those 6 white police officers who were accused and charged with heinous crimes. That's 1800s. This is 2024. The same stuff is still going on. What do we do to fight against that? Look at positive information about people who can rise. The brother's name is Frederick Bruce Thomas, who was from Mississippi, that again changed the world. He died in a bad situation in terms of finances, but impactful. Next slide, please. So, U.S. hypocrisy. That's brother Patrice Lumumba on your left side there. Patrice Lumumba was addressing the parliament there when he was being instituted as the prime minister. So if you read about the CIA, if you read a recent book called White Malice, by a white woman talking about the CIA's involvement in covert operations destroying Africa, Lumumba came to the United States asking for assistance. Lumumba came here to the United States to try to meet with the president. The president went golf and didn't want to talk to him. Lumumba wanted to talk to the Congress about what's going on in Congo, how the Belgians were destroying the cultural experience of the African people. Resources are being exploited. He wants to come here to talk. No opportunities. But you know what? The white boy from Ukraine, Zelensky, got a chance to address Congress, I believe maybe twice. Here in this country. Dismissed the black man back in the past, but that was a white guy in his country to come speak to Congress to say what you need to do to help us little people over there. This is why the policy becomes challenging, Pan-Africanist, because Russia is not like an enemy to black people. Russia has a university called Patrice Lumumba University. Russia has a mountain named after Paul Robeson. Russia gave weapons to those African countries trying to gain independence from the Europeans. So they cannot be our enemy, full-fledged. Just think about that. Cuba cannot be our enemy, African people, because they also gave weaponry to African countries fighting for independence. You can't fight a war against guns with a pea shooter. You need the same kind of weapons to fight against that. So we have to look at the dynamics of politics. Your enemy may not be my enemy. Your enemy may be my friend. Check that out. So again, it didn't allow Lumumba to speak, but they allowed Zelensky to speak. Next slide. I'm just showing this because these are images that are for in Ukraine prior to that so-called invasion. Here is they're at the party, but you kind of can't see it. It's kind of small. But that drink there is called Olmec. Olmec in Ukraine. You know about the Olmec people in Central America? Those gigantic blackheads in Central America, looking like brothers from Nigeria or Kenya. Blackheads. So they got a drink called Olmec there in Ukraine. They know about your culture. Just don't tell you about it. And this just again looking at the environment. You see dead city environments, all that's destroyed now, dilapidated. And I guarantee Ukraine will be built before some of the African countries will be built. I guarantee that just happened, but that Ukraine will be rebuilt before some of the African countries will be rebuilt. Next slide. So the hypocrisy that is going on, they're attacking these immigrants, where are they coming from? Nicaragua, Honduras, Mexico, immigrants, all this white backlash against immigrants, but you won't let the Ukrainians come in. You don't mind white people coming on. Look at the policies, look at the hypocrisy of that. But the immigrants coming from these low-lying places versus the European coming in, no issues with that. So they don't mind that. But check this out. You saw what happened when that bridge collapsed in Baltimore? Who was on that bridge working?
Hispanic.
The immigrants, so-called immigrants. People from Honduras, Mexico, Guatemala, on that bridge, filling potholes, doing the dirty work you won't do. And we're going to be looking at them as the bad people. Policies, hypocrisy, terrible. Next slide. So, universal discrimination. Haiti's now in the same situation. 1804, gained their independence. Only African folks in this hemisphere to kick white people's butt. They would never allow that spirit to rise again. That's why Haiti looks so backwards. Haitians are beautiful people. You down here in Florida, you got a lot of Haitians because of the easy transport over and the cultural connections. Haiti is not our enemy. Haiti should be who we should be supporting, but we've had CIA and governmental structures hindering that. So again, hypocrisy. Next slide. So, as I move into kind of looking at the science of what I've done in the past, poisons. And Russians try to poison people who are just trying to change their environment. Not saying Russia's like some utopia, because Vladimir Putin has created where he can be president forever. And this guy that wants to run for president in November wants to do the same thing here. I don't need to mention his name, do I? He wants to be a dictator. The bad people want a dictator. So that's what's going on in Russia. But this guy, or the governmental structure of Russia, has poisoned people who have been, I don't know, trying to protest against the government. So it's highly probable that this anti-cholinergic agent that kind of paralyzed them, this is like someone involved in making changes in society, a group called Pussy Riot. It's like just white women who are talking about revolution, but you got the government going against them. Next slide. And this one's more recent because the leader, people's like elected leader there in Russia, Navalny, they said he was in prison for some erroneous reasons, but he just was murdered in prison last month. I won't follow the story, but he was poisoned with this thing called Novichok. It was implanted in his underwear, and they tried to poison him until he was sick for a while, but then they imprisoned him, and now he passed away in prison. So he passed away right for elections that Putin had. Politics. Things are happening. I don't know what's going to happen before November, but get ready for the wild ride. It's happening all over the world. Get ready for the wild ride. So next slide. This issue of chemicals or poisons. Our melanin now becomes something to attack. You see, melanin has biological properties that allow certain agents to latch onto. Therefore, you can design molecules to what make a person more impacted. This is somebody from South Africa. So it says Walter Bassoon was director of Project Coast, white South African biological and chemical warfare agency that developed various poisons, viruses, biological agents, and drugs to use against blacks, including a vaccine that, now this is way before the COVID-19. A vaccine that caused sterility. Bassoon was called the Mengele of South Africa and was suspected of at least 229 poisoning murders. When asked about his racist operation, Bassoon said, did not mention Hitler, Mengele, or the Nazis. He says, I must confirm that the structure of the project was based on the US system. That's where I learned the most. So we don't really understand the nature of what's being against us and what's being used to attack us. It doesn't just have to be mentally. We know it can happen spiritually, but biologically we can be attacked. Next slide. So, jokingly, when we look at how people view us, they want to be like you. So there's somebody trying to get a tan at a tattoo parlor, so they can be like you. Next slide. Little child, just innocently. Maybe if I had changed my brand of suntan lotion, I'd get a tan like yours. Little kids, they don't know what's going on. They don't have any sense of racism really growing up because everybody wants to be friends until you get to the middle school years, I guess, and you hear things at home and in high school now disconnect. But little kids can be maneuvered and modified in their brains. Next slide. That's what I saw today. Y'all know how it is. It can be 30 degrees out and throwing frisbees or shorts on. That's not black experience at family. It's hot down here all the time. Baton Rouge hot all the time. Doing Cookman hot all the time. So y'all don't understand. But if y'all go to Utah, go up to Rhode Island, y'all not throwing frisbees out there. Cold weather. Next slide. And then biologically, the rhythm and what goes on with the drum, confused by the loud drums, roar is flushed into the neck. So that bass drum, that sound, and y'all had a bad scenario here in Florida where a white man killed a black child at a convenience store. What was his name?
Jordan Davis? No.
Jordan
Davis in
Davis.
Jacksonville? Yeah.
Brother was just in the car, and a white man felt so threatened that he had to shoot the brother in the car because of the music. It does something to them. It does something to us. I think there's something on Netflix now, or Hulu, or what Freaknik. Talk about how people did some things in the past, but rhythm and music and sound and people, it makes people do some things. Next slide. So, you ever heard of Jack Johnson? Boxer? So Ken Burns did a documentary called Unforgivable Blackness. I like the way this kind of image is, because Jack Johnson was 1900s, early 1900s, was doing some research. He was, not research, boxing. I mean, he was the bad brother. Way before Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali said he got what he got from Jack Johnson. But he was, the white people called him an Ethiopian. Did you know that? Ethiopian. Why do you think they call him an Ethiopian when he's from Texas? Because they didn't want you to think you could do that. He's not the black man that's from here. No, you can't do that. So self-esteem, pride, and all that. He had that, but his demise was white women. So they went after him. So he didn't get a chance to do what he needed to do to be a strong African figure, but y'all know what he did with his fists. Next slide. So, that unforgivable blackness, do not deny your Africanity. When I was in Vietnam and Thailand, oh my goodness, you saw all those places where skin lightening facilities. I mean, they go through a whole regimen to kind of lighten the skin, to run from their blackness, run from their darkness. India, the same thing. And you know what's going on in the continent. Nigeria and Africa, all those skin lightening creams, you know what's happening. You can't run from your blackness. Melin is an advantage. Number one, it's an antioxidant. That's why it makes your skin look so young and sweet. Nerve production facilitator in the brain, it makes the nerve impulses go quicker and faster. That's why psychomotor skills development is better in terms of movements. We change the game and everything has to do with movement. Rescue me if I'm wrong. Rest of it, okay. Energy transformer. Everywhere you see it in the brain, in the body, it's functioning to allow energy to be transformed from the outside for the body to interpret. In the ear, inner ear neuron. In the brain, substantiography movement. In your eyes, if you don't have blackness in the back of your eyeball, you're virtually blind. Disease is called retinitis pigmentosus. Light waves to channel for your brain to interpret that. So everywhere you see, even the skin, you think about that. You think about having bad vibes. What are vibes? What are vibrations? What's this? Do you feel that? Yes. It's the melanin that serves in that capacity to do that. Next slide. So the large electromagnetic spectrum that exists in the world, all we really see, they say, is visible light. It's part that is right there in the middle. About 300 to 700 nanometers, right there in the middle, visible light. Ra, sun. We praised the sun in the past. The sun is beautiful. Some people running from the sun now as they get burned up. African people, that sun is not your enemy. The sun is what's going to drive you toward a new horizon. But along that spectrum, you got electricity, laser circuits, you got radio, radar, infrared, you got on the other end cosmic waves, and radiation from the sky. All that is out there, but how about spiritual waves, conscious waves? Do they exist? Somewhere out there, so our bodies are being connected to that. Next slide. So we know our ancient African ancestors studied this. That's Akhenaten and Nefertiti. I like this slide because at the end of the rays, the rays are coming down, but at the end, as the rays are hitting skin, it's like little hands. By the nostrils, it's the ankh. They understood the importance of sun rays and light. That's why it's the first time we thought of monotheism. Not Moses, but Akhenaten. What was the one God? Ra, sun. They understood that way back then. Very important for us today. Without the vitamin D coming from the sun, and the vitamin D itself is not even a vitamin, it's a steroid hormone coming from the sun, produced in the body. So all this is science. As you run from your blackness, you run from the science that keeps you healthy. Next slide. A book called Synaptic Self, which is explaining how each of us is different because of how our synapses form. I know you psychology students run from biological psychology. Don't like physiological psychology, all that's science. But guess what? You need to know it. It's that science that dictates, again, our opportunity to move forward. So the synapse is the place where you have different things form. So a racist may have different synapses. A person who's more in collectivity and socialism has different synapses. And it results because of how their environment produces them. I'm showing this because the synapse in the neuron looks just like the skin cell that makes your melanin, melanocyte. Up top there, in pink, the little brown thing, that's the melanocyte. It's like a tree branch. At the end of the extension is where the melanin then collects and then makes your skin have an even tone. That bottom figure on the right side, that long extension is the axon, the bottom part is the dendrite. It releases chemicals. The same things happen with the melanocyte, it releases chemicals. So the skin melanocyte and the brain neuron are pretty much like similar. Next slide. So that's blown up. You see the tree-like image of a cell at the top of it, the melanin then disperses and gives you smooth, even skin tone. And then the neuron itself, again, is releasing these chemicals that are causing your brain to operate right. And there's definitely a connection between brain neurotransmitters and skin. Because what the same chemicals that make the skin are making those brain neurotransmitters. That's a whole other discussion that we're not going to go through today. Next slide. So, melanin is a skin hormone. So, the melanin's being produced, let's say a woman's giving birth, so her body's changing. Why would it need to get darker? Because the melanin's being released, so you know it's there significantly doing something. It's not just some skin color to give you some visualization different than somebody else. Nah, it's a biological advantage. So all those years they told us to be inferior because we're black, be inferior because of our color. Gave us all kinds of names, colored people. whatever the heck that is. So this color that we have, this pigment, is overwhelmingly important for our health. And I'm just saying that right there on that belly, going down to the vaginal area where the baby's coming out, that actual image there looks just like the fetus that's developing inside internally. The microcosm and the macrocosm. As above, so below. Next slide. So the brain, for me, is the most elaborately constructed entity in the universe, which means without it, you can't do anything else. Why not study it? Why not focus on ways to what? Enhance it. Next slide. Even that back part there, that back part, that black area, anybody know what that black area is called? The back, right in the back of the head. Cerebellum. Yep, cerebellum. Cerebellum. If you like blow that up, it looks like the tree of life. In Africa, the acacia tree, the tree of life, right there. 70 billion neurons just on the cerebellum. You get about 12 billion in the cortex, about 1 billion in the spinal cord. Most of them on that back part where the black area is that cerebellum. That's pretty powerful because they say it only deals with fine coordinated movement, like trying to pick up something that's real small, fine coordinated, but it has much more to do with it than many neurons. All those dark splotches in the middle, those little dots, the mental nerve tract, that's the Melin in the brain stem. One that's deep in there is called substantia nigra. Substantia nigra, black substance. That right there is the pineal gland. Perhaps you've heard of that, perhaps not. It produces a chemical called melatonin and serotonin. Without it, there's no connection to a spiritual highness or another element that you can't see. Next slide. So, for those that are in psychology, two main systems. If you understand about what makes you feel good, like dopamine, it's a neurotransmitter. There's a system called the nigrostriatal pathway. Just talked about for movement. If there's a disruption in the nigrostriatal pathway, guess what? Movement problems. The other one is the mesolimbic system. So these two pathways, that's the nigrostriatal right there, and like purple going up. This is the mesolimbic, green going that way. It's for emotions. This is going straight to the front part of the brain, the nucleus accumbens, the front of the brain where you have reinforcement. There's a reason why people do drugs and keep doing drugs and then can't let it go. Because it's stimulating that dopamine in that area of the brain that makes you feel good, and then you know the issue with people saying that high, they keep doing drugs because they're trying to get that same high and they'll never get it again. Dopamine is the reason. And again, those areas that are deep in the brain produce dopamine. Next slide. Just another slide showing you again how deep this is. As you start sectioning the brain, you start to see how deep they are in there. Darkness deep in the brain, but it's not like you see it in sunlight, so the dark cells have to be doing something, right? Even in the middle there, in that red part right there, so the red nucleus. If you ever heard of red nucleus, those are mirror neurons. What do you mean by mirror neurons? Like you look in the mirror and see something? It's exactly how those neurons are working. If I ask you right now, can you moonwalk? What's the first thing that comes to your mind? Who? Michael Jackson. I mean, basically, you're not doing it. You didn't see me do it. But mirror neurons are already lit up with that in your mind. You see a baby, and you go, baby goes, Those are mirror neurons lighting up doing that deep in the center of the brain. Pigment. So the pigmentation in the middle of the brain is highly important. Next slide. Again, just showing you the images of how important it is to have that darkness right in the middle there. So my point is not working again. So the darkness there, you get dorsal raphe, ventral tegmental, those are the dopamine, and right down here, substantia nigra. This darkness right here. Red nucleus right there. Deep in the brain. Next slide. So up top is a bad brain. Bottom is a healthy brain, because you see the darkness. It's the midbrain. If that area is not there with that neuromelanin, guess what? You have some problems. What specific neurodegenerative disorder can happen? Parkinson's disease. So if you look at a problem when it's relieved and removed, next slide please. What happens if it's working right? Psychomotor skill development is enhanced. Hip hop music, rap music, y'all know it's not easy to spit some rhymes. No more rhythm. That's higher brain function, if you ask me. Because if you hear a white person rap, I think you know what's that white person rap because there's no rhythm to it, right? So you know the distinction. Dance moves and rhythm, you know we changed the game when it comes to new forms of movement. I'm not going to twerk up here. That's, African people just got rhythm and it just changed the game. Stepping and fraternities and sororities. And then drumming and beats. They took the drum away from us during the enslavement process because the drum was changing the world. The drum was having an impact on how people communicated. You had to hear the drum. We're talking about the inner ear and frequencies and Melin. Hearing a different frequency when you hear the drum. That's why we have drums normally when we have our presentations, right? When we have our organizational group settings. The drum is to bring in that energy. And so the Melin in the ear does that. And so they say that many Melin recessive people, the reason why white people may be not able to dance because they maybe are dancing the words, not the music. So this is all. Sports moves, basketball, football, track, tennis, golf, we changed the game. You know that is the case. That's why, how could you possibly be inferior when you changed the game and now you're dominating the game? They knew you weren't inferior. They had to structure so you hate yourself. That's what I'm saying, that Brown versus Board education decision is saying let's integrate and be with them, not focusing on us. Could you imagine how many Wakandas we could have had? Real life Wakandas, if we focus on our stuff, but not knowing yourself, you're in trouble. As I conclude here, next slide. To me, I don't think it's a white woman. That's a black woman sitting on a computer chip. That's 1990 art. Sitting on a computer chip. On the left side of her is a DNA molecule. On the other side of her is the chemical structure of a carbon-based molecule. Melin is carbon-based. And on the far side is the metal netera, or the so-called hieroglyphics, all on one image, meaning people were studying and have been studying, you just don't know yourself. Swallow D. Lubeck's wrote a book called The Temple of Man, studying the structures of monuments were built on the human body. Next slide. So to conclude, I've written these books to kind of delve into this, to break it down so that we're not too thrown off with the science. But I wrote The Science of Melin years ago, 1995, revised it, Dark Matters, Dark Secrets, to go more into the brain, deal with drug addiction and pigment power. I wrote that as the COVID crisis was hitting us. But I talked about the importance of melanin in health. Next slide. Why darkness matters. It shows you that in the brain, those dark areas that are not receiving sunlight. But they're dark for some reason, because it matters. I wrote that along with Dr. Richard King. May his soul rest in peace. He passed away. In this new version that you had seen on the right side there, did an obituary for him in there. And Ann Brown and Bruce Bynum, they're the other co-authors on this book. Ann Brown's retired from Edgar Everett College as a biochemist, and brother Bruce Bynum retired from UMass Amherst as a clinical psychologist. We all got together and put this treatise together to talk about, again, the importance of melanin inside the brain. First had it published with Joanne Jufu's company out of Chicago. Next slide. So the conclusion, we must get back to the basics. Read the study. It's not going to happen if we don't do that. I mean, we can't wait for someone to tell us. We have to go seek that. And it's now easy. You push a button, get an answer. But how do you know the direction to go? 2, internal reparations. Yes, we are fighting for external reparations. External reparations for our community is very important. We need it, but guess what? It's easy to start here first. Internal reparations, changing your game first. It is not a crime not to be able to defend yourself. The pacifist movement and nonviolence may have had an impact on our approach. There's a good movie out right now called Rustin. Anybody seen the movie Rustin yet? So, very good movie, but it's talking about Bayard Rustin is the reason why there was a march on Washington. He was a pacifist. He wasn't into fighting back. He was a Quaker. So he wasn't like the Black Panther and said, no, we're going to defend our community. He wasn't like Robert Williams there in Monroe, North Carolina. Negroes with guns protecting his community. Imhotep wrote a book called We Will Shoot Back. Documents people throughout the country who shot back. And guess what? He wouldn't continue to try to destroy you. So that whole issue of defending yourself, and we are close to Alabama, I think sometime a few years ago, the Alabama boat ride or something like that. Y'all saw what happened? When black people get together to defend themselves. Know thy enemy. Enemy may not be for your progression in our communities, redlining, gentrification, all these things that are happening for a reason, to disconnect you from resources. Be remembrers of the way. Hickory Armour wrote a book called 2,000 Seasons, talking about the historical parallel of slavery, but write your own history. Write your own story. If you're not the ones writing, then someone else is going to tell your story. So coming to FAMU, Tallahassee, again, it's important to value the education that you are getting. And then have Melin on your mind, make an impact. So I don't think there's going to be a lot of presentations on Melin for this conference, but what is important is students are presenting. As you are presenting, you're now changing the world from your scope. So let me end there by saying thank you for your attention, and I'm ready to hear some student presentations also.
Anybody got questions? Where's Dr. Sarah? Oh, here she comes. Okay. Questions for anybody?
That's great. Behind you, Dr. Palmer. I'm so glad you was going to ask a question because I was going to bring him up. This is our Chief Operating Officer under the President. So maybe your question, and then if you can bring us greetings, Doc, we appreciate it.
Well, I want to bring you greetings, and I really don't have a question. I just wanted to thank Dr. Owens, but more importantly, thank the Psychologist Department for this whole week. I'm not sure if everybody knows, my office sits right outside this door, and I've seen the wonderful groups of folks come in to enjoy this particular conference. And this is what we need at Florida A&M University. But more importantly, Dr. Tim Owens is a good friend of mine. We graduated from college together. And again, Tim, I didn't eat this morning, but I'm full. From what you presented. I would tell you again, I mean, you got to see the world to change the world. I mean, he dropped some lines on us today, and I just want to thank you. But I also know back when we were doing neuroscience together, so I'm the one who told you to have the cerebellum up there, and it's a substantial diagram. So I'm a neuroscientist as well. So just to see where you are, Doc, I'm so proud of you. And just no secret, for those who don't know me, I'm a professor in pharmacy. I started here in '95, and then I moved into the provost office. Left here in 2016 to Virginia State to the provost and executive vice president. Now I'm back as the chief operating officer and as well as the executive vice president. But when I was at Virginia State, I tried to recruit this young man to be my chair of the department. And I'm glad I did because I wouldn't be with him right now. And again, I just appreciate you, Doc. And again, you got a treat this morning. Keep up the great work. Keep up the travels. I monitor his travels when he goes around the world. But again, I think the important thing, if I had to ask a question, with the basis of neuroscience, as well as your world travel and just being around the world and Black psychology and connecting all that together, I think students really need to have that basic foundation as well when we talk about, again, that neuroscience, that brain, and that melanin and how it impacts everyone. But just in general for publications and stuff like that, I can see that many of your publications also you collaborate with people. What is the importance of collaboration in this particular field, and how can you really help our students understand that importance?
The main thing is that you don't exist by yourself. Well, Dr. Palmer, thank you for those comments about the background where we are, but you don't communicate by yourself. So when I went to Hershey Medical School, you were already there. So you were doing work in pharmacology. So guess what? You have expertise. You know what? You can't exist by yourself, so you may want to collaborate with somebody who knows something a little bit better. I have a colleague here that's communicating with my colleague at FAMU on African self-consciousness, right, Nika? That's Liv, right? So she's doing work with a colleague there at Clark Atlanta on a research project. So everybody has a component that they can share. How do you now capitalize on that? Bottom line is communication. We live in our silos now in our own little worlds, but as you communicate, now you're here at a conference, seeing someone doing a certain kind of research, you know what? I have this part. Oh, really? You do that? Okay, great. And I do emphasize the technology component. Also statistics. If you're good at statistics and research, you're going to be much better off than someone who's not engaged in that. So again, be able to collaborate with those that maybe have a skill set that you don't quite possess. So that's the most important thing. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Let's thank Dr. Timothy Moore one more time. Oh, somebody had a comment?
Dr. Holly.
Holly?
So I just, thank you, Dr. Moore. It's always a pleasure to see your presentations. Always learn something every single time. I thought it was interesting how, when you talked about the different, what I'll call Black revolutionaries, it's interesting to me that given all we've been through and all we know about their work that they've done, we still repeat the same things and make it difficult for individuals like that to come even to our own institutions. And I wanted to know if you have any suggestions on how do we open doors for what some would call radical Black scholars, to the Western perspective at least, to come to our institutions. Oftentimes they seem more welcome at other institutions than in our own homes, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah. The reality is the names, the drop of names. So when I was in Mississippi, Hattiesburg, Mississippi is nearby. Do you know a famous Black psychologist from Hattiesburg, Mississippi?
Yes, sir.
Who's that? Amos Wilson. His books have changed the world in our perspective. So by knowing his connections there, he went to school with a woman named Dory Ladner, who just passed away last month. Dory Ladner was at the table with Medgar Evers as a 14-year-old. So she went to school with Amos, one of the presidents of Morehouse College, Walter Masters from Hattiesburg. So we have to now make some connections where people know the names of individuals that are making change in society. That's the main thing. If you think they're radical, well, why are they radical? What's radical mean? You know what I mean? So in terms of inviting people who may not have the same position, I don't know how y'all deal with media people like Candace Owens, somebody like that. Like she may be popular on white campuses, not black campuses. The dynamic of us being open, this whole attack against DEI and critical race theory is to hinder that. So we don't have people who are feeling comfortable to let things out and express themselves. So I think that exposing people by sharing that, look, we're just talking about peace, really. If you think about one of these original articles that Dr. Naim Akbar, Wade Nobles, I think Khatib, they wrote an article called Voodoo or IQ, Introduction to Black Psychology. They raised the question, it's not integration versus segregation, it's liberation versus control. So if you teach that and invite people to deal with that, if you're not dealing with liberation, you shouldn't be a part of our operation. If you're still trying to be in control, then you're not part of our operation. So in that case, I'm saying, change the nature of the question. If you focus on liberation, come on in.
Any other? You can go to that mic right there. Other questions, if you have them, you can line up at the mic on the right.
Hi, so I noticed that you mentioned board of education, and if we were to not be limited and focus on ourselves mainly what we could overcome, what do you think are some ways now that we can better ourselves as a community?
Good question, because I think you're doing it right here. I think it's Good Friday, and Fridays they say sometimes people don't come to campus, so that's a challenge for people coming out to a research conference, but guess what, you're here. So you're here to better yourself. So we have to put the effort in. That's why I'm saying internal reparations is key. If we're not going to do that internally, nothing's going to happen. So it starts where at home first. So our schools, that's why for me, product of the HBCU experience. Went to Lincoln, went to Howard, taught at Fayetteville State, taught Morehouse, taught Clark Atlanta, communicated with family. So for me, being a product of the experience, I'm going to give back. So that's what we need to be, giving back. The more we disperse that we're happening with the immigration, I'm just saying, our schools lost that strength. That's why for March Madness, if there was something truly revolutionary, brothers could maybe put down the basketball, so we're not playing.
Right. Let's give Dr. Timothy Moore another round of applause. As we transition to our student presentations. Thank you so much.